So this month we are talking about grace. Now, last week I started off with the definition of grace from our founder, Ernest Holmes. And he says that grace is God's givingness of love to life. God's givingness. They described it as unmerited, divine love. It is not something that we have to earn. It's not something that we have to work hard to get. It is actually naturally given to us. The grace of God, the grace that is bestowed upon us throughout our lives. Oftentimes when we think about grace, we think about movement. We equate grace with people who are graceful. I never was one of those people. 3 years of ballet and it still didn't work. But I tried anyway to be very graceful. And dancers, we often think of dancers as graceful. And I know we have some dancers here in the audience that spent their life being that graceful expression of movement in the world. And, there's a rhythm to life that happens when we're in that graceful flow of things. There's that ebb and flow of it. Everything seems to be a little easier when things are happening gracefully in our lives. Like I said, it's often equated to a dance, but not all dances could even be considered graceful. Sometimes dances are a little more erratic and a little more forceful and things like that, just like our life can be a little more erratic and more forceful, more tumultuous at times and at other times. And part of grace is learning to experience it in the turmoil. Now, currently in our world right now, we have turmoil. We have some turmoil going on in several different locations in the world right now. And whether we're in that location or not, it is felt. Because that energy of that tumultuous situation, the war and the death and the destruction and things that are happening in various places in our world affect us whether we are there or not. Of course, they more gravely affect the people who are present in the situations, but the rest of us are impacted just as much by what is happening in our world. This idea of grace being a dance, and this dance being erratic sometimes and being smooth sometimes, is really how we move through our lives. One of my favorite singers is Garth Brooks. He's a country western singer. You may have heard of him here or there. He has a song called The Dance. I love this song. And in this song it says, "I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance." So there's this thing that's going on, and it's like I have to be in the midst of some of the problems too in order to experience the grace that is available to me when it's not there anymore, when I don't have that ups and downs of life. I need to be able to experience both of those. And so that's what the focus of my talk is today is about being grace in these troubled times, being grace when we're in a vulnerable situation, being grace when we are feeling as though we weren't perfect in a way that we should have been. And so as we're talking about this, there's some pillars of grace that I want to reflect upon today. And some of those pillars are, again, that idea of imperfection. We often shied away from being imperfect. We think we need to be perfect all the time. But the truth is, that's not how we're meant to be. And if we're trying to strive for perfectionism all the time, generally it's, I love the way Brene Brown puts it. She says that trying to be perfect is a symptom of shame. If we didn't feel shame, then we wouldn't feel the need to be perfect all the time. And so as we work through these situations where we embrace the imperfection that is happening in our lives, embrace the times when we are challenged, embrace the times when we feel a little more vulnerable, because when we embrace those, then the dichotomy between that situation and the experience of grace is so much more profound. We can see when grace is happening, when we are in the midst of these tumultuous times and so forth in our lives. And so some of the things that we can do as far as helping us move through that, I've talked about lots of times in lots of different ways, but compassion, especially self-compassion. When we are feeling vulnerable, when we're feeling like we didn't do the best we could have done, we wish we'd have done something different. When we can practice a little bit of self-compassion, we can move through those challenging situations just that little bit more gracefully than we might have otherwise. And of course, then When we can feel self-compassion, then we can naturally turn compassion out towards others. And we can be a little more gentle as we see other people struggling with the things that they're going through. Now, one of the phrases that you may have heard it every once in a while spoken, there before the grace of God go I. I used to think that was me. If I said that, I used to think I was sitting in judgment of somebody. Oh, look at them. Oh, thank God. There before the grace of God go I. Because I was thinking I'm not in that situation. But what I've learned through that phrase is that it's more of a recognition that I am living in grace, that I am embracing that idea of grace, that I am doing what Joel Goldsmith calls practicing the presence, that I am bringing the consciousness and the awareness of the divine into every situation. And therefore, the grace of God is present there for me. And I'm not experiencing the challenges that somebody else might be experiencing because the grace of God is with me. Because I've brought it into my experience. Because I've done the work myself to bring that in to what is going on around me. There are lots of ways that we can practice the presence of the divine. And there are actually several books written about that from different points of view, too. One of the most famous is written by St. John of the Cross. When he's talking about the dark night of the soul, his book is called Practicing the Presence. And is about being consciously aware of the presence of the divine, that universal love intelligence that is moving into expression through each and every one of us all of the time. But we need to be aware of it. We need to make that contact ourselves because it's always working. It is always flowing through us, and it is always looking for an outlet for its grace to show up in the world. Joel Goldsmith tells a wonderful story of a family that were students of his during World War II in London. And on one particular night, there was a heavy amount of bombing. And as the bombing was going on around them, they were in their home, just doing their daily things that they do. They were practicing the presence. They were remembering every time they heard a bomb that God was there too. They were remembering every time they felt the earth shake beneath them because it had landed somewhere near them, that the presence of the divine was right there with them, uplifting them, holding them, right there with them, accompanying them through this journey. When they went outside after all the bombing had stopped and looked around, the entire neighborhood around their house was completely destroyed. And their house was standing perfectly still, perfectly intact. Now you might think, well, they're just lucky. Oh, what a great, how good they were that they didn't get that problem. But really, it's about the consciousness of the divine was right there. If we could imagine what would happen if the consciousness of God was everywhere, would the bombs have even stopped? Would the planes have decided to turn around and go the other way and find another place to bomb? Or would they have been called back to the Air Force Base that they came from? We don't know. But we do have a demonstration of one particular family practicing the presence in the moment of horrendous fear. I can just imagine the fear of listening to the bombs hitting buildings around me. Probably a lot of anger. Probably a lot of judgment going on there. But these people were able to get themselves in a place of centeredness and groundedness within their own being. And as they say in the Bible, none of these things come nigh my dwelling place. None of these things can touch me. Because I wasn't dwelling in that home. I was with the presence of the divine. And God's grace was there with me at that moment. And so practicing the presence, bringing that consciousness and awareness of God into our lives allows us to become more resilient, stronger, and able to withstand the things that are going on around us. This is also evident in nature. If we look at one of the strongest things we can think of in our world around us are the trees. The trees can grow really super tall and they can withstand the winds and the weather and all of the things that are going on around them. They can even withstand fire to a certain extent. We've seen trees that are growing after the bark has all been burned off of them, and there's new shoots coming off of the trees. They can withstand it because they have become resilient. And how do they become resilient? By taking their roots deep. Their roots become deep and grounded. But their roots don't become deep unless they are experiencing the things going on around them. How many of you remember that experiment that was done in the early 90s at the biosphere in Arizona, where they put a bunch of people in a self-contained environment for 2 years? They had trees growing in there, and the trees did beautifully for a while, and they reached a certain height, and they fell over. Now, they weren't rotted. They didn't have insects attacking them. They weren't diseased in any way. They simply fell over. And the reason they fell over was because they didn't have the wind there to help them make their roots strong. They didn't experience any of the hardships that trees out in nature experience. And so, therefore, they didn't develop that root structure, that firm foundation of belief that we would have developed within ourselves. They didn't get that. And so when they reached a certain point in their life, they just fell over. They couldn't support themselves anymore. We need adversity. We need challenges in our lives to help us experience and grow and have the need to reach out and connect with that universal presence. If everything was going perfect in our life, would you ever sit down and pray? Not too many times. I mean, I like to pray when things are going good too, but most often we fall on our knees in prayer when we are challenged. When we're experiencing some kind of hardship, that's when we reach out and connect. If we did that more frequently on an everyday basis, our roots would get really firm and strong, and we would be able to withstand the small things that happen in our lives. One of my favorite places to go is the coast of Monterey, California. Have you ever seen the cypresses there that grow? They are buffeted by the most horrific winds coming in off the ocean, to the point that they actually grow sideways. The tops of the trees are actually going sideways away from the wind. It's the most fascinating thing to watch. They grow on rocky cliffs, having that wind hit them every single day. In fact, almost every single moment. The wind is coming in off the ocean. So much so that they grow in that particular shape, and yet they've got firm foundations. They are deeply rooted in that hard soil, the rocky cliffs of the coast of California. They are able to withstand the elements because they have rooted themselves so firmly. And I think this is so key for us to be able to do that. Not only be rooted and firm, but also develop the ability to sway, to go with where the wind blows us, to react to it and be in it, but not let it take us over. To be in the world, but not of the world, as Jesus said to us. I found this really fun poem when I was looking up things today. And it's just really short, but it reminded me so beautifully of what a tree does. It says, I saw God in the forest teaching Tai Chi to the trees and the wind, bowing to the sea. Imagine that. The trees are like these beings that have learned Tai Chi, and they just kind of sway with the world. Imagine if we could do that ourselves, if we could actually be in the experience of problems in our lives and allow it to just make us move the way we need to move, but keep us firmly grounded, firmly centered in our beliefs, in the faith, in the grace of God that is moving through us at all times. This is how we become more of God in our lives. And, there are easy ways that we can do that. I talked about compassion earlier. There are other things that we can do, this idea of being fully present in the moment. Oftentimes when we are facing something that is unpleasant, we want to leave. We want to get out of there as quickly as possible. But if we can stick with it and endure and practice that resiliency, that we are slowly developing as we're swaying in the wind, then we can begin to have a different experience of it. That's where we give a place for Spirit to operate in our lives. That's where we give a place for grace to be felt, to be seen in our lives. It's when we are in the midst of challenges and we move with them and flow with them and allow them to be. There is a ripple effect of grace, too, that's really powerful. When we experience grace, when we become that place where grace is felt in our lives, when we embody that essence of resiliency, authenticity, and vulnerability when we are in those challenges, then we become a model for those around us. One of the things that I get commented on more often than anything else is my willingness to be authentic and vulnerable, my willingness to be real. I can't stand up and not be real anymore. It just doesn't work for me. So there is something about that people see it and it gives them permission to do the same. And so grace ripples out as we become more authentic and willing to stand in our truth, then we become that place of it. And it leads others to do the same more frequently in their lives. Can you imagine what our world would be like if everybody was being real? If we didn't have to worry and try to second guess what's going on in somebody else's mind because we were just out there and that was what it was. Nobody had to hide or shy away from their experience because of their shame of being imperfect or their unwillingness to be vulnerable in our lives. Grace is not a passive activity. Grace requires us to actually get out and do something. When we think about being in that flow, we think, oh, that's gentle and easy. But there has to be the willingness to do it. There has to be that openness within ourselves to show up as our authentic self, as our real self. That willingness to be vulnerable and to take action when we're called to take action in the world around us. So I like to anchor my talks with a little bit of a spiritual practice. And so today I'd like us to do that together. So if you would, just relax into your seat. Feel your chair beneath you. Know that you are perfectly held and grounded. Nothing's going to happen. And if you want to, close your eyes. I like to close my eyes. It keeps me more contained, more centered in myself. And just bring to mind some kind of a situation that might be a little problematic or worrisome right now. It doesn't have to be really big, just anything that's happening in your life right now. Maybe you have a relationship with someone else that's a little troubled, or you've got some bill you need to pay and you're not really sure how you're going to pay it, or the neighbors have been keeping you up all night playing loud music. Whatever that situation is, just kind of bring that to mind. And just feel into it. Feel all of the emotions that are happening within you as you think about that. Don't try to push them away. Just let them be. And now as you just take in some nice deep breaths and allow your body to just move and sway in whatever way it feels called to do in this moment. Imagine that you are that young tree blowing in the breeze. And just feel that feeling as you sit in that situation and move with it instead of hardening to it and resisting it. If things start to get a little more tense, just allow your body to move a little extra. Keeping in mind whatever that feeling is that was causing you a little anxiety. And so just take in a nice deep breath now. Let it out. And know that at any time when you start to feel this tension or turmoil, you can just take that moment, close your eyes, and allow yourself to be gently moved by the grace of the divine. Because it's always out there. It's always waiting for its place to express itself. So be the expression of it. And if you feel like dancing, get up and dance. I want to end with this passage I found. Being grace in a troubled world is not about escaping challenges, but facing them with a heart full of compassion and a spirit resilient to adversity. Let us carry forth the understanding that grace is not a destination, but a journey, a continual unfolding of our inner elegance. I love that phrase, our inner elegance. May we, through mindful awareness, compassion, and a commitment to embracing life's imperfections, find the grace within ourselves and radiate it outward to create a more compassionate and harmonious world. Let's take this into prayer. I invite our practitioners to stand and surround us, knowing that they hold us in that heart of grace at all times. If you ever have a prayer request, please make sure you go to our website and put in a request, or just let one of us know and we will pass that on to our ministry of prayer. So right here and right now, I know that there is only one thing operating. It is the grace of the divine. It is moving through each one of us. It is showing up as us in all that we are, all that we do. It shows up in our perfection and our imperfection. It shows up in our vulnerability and our resiliency. It shows up when we are troubled and when we are at peace. And I know that we don't have to do anything to merit this influx of grace in our lives. For it was given to us in the beginning before ever the world began. And it remains with us, continuously allowing itself to express through us. Allowing itself to be that embodiment of Christ within us. I know that this grace is unfolding itself as our perfect inner elegance in every situation that we encounter. I know the wholeness of the divine is ours now and forevermore. And I just simply give thanks for this knowing. Thanks for the experience of grace as it expresses itself in this world. And I release this word into the law, to that creative intelligence that always says yes, that is always unfolding for the highest and greatest good of all. I let it go and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is.